So this isn't a political debate about should we do it. It's a question of how to get there. So, Oil Change International is currently working on some of what the global carbon budget looks like. And I'll talk a bit about budgets in a few more minutes if I have time. For 1.5, because what does that actually mean globally? How fast do we have to decline? All these very complicated and difficult questions. And we'll hopefully have some information that will be coming in the next couple of months we can share with more detail, but it's scary stuff. Let me just have some notes here. So in Canada, let's talk about that a bit more. In the context of the federal climate plan, they want to reduce Canada's emissions by approximately a third by 2030, which is a target that's too low for either the 2 degree or the 1.5 degree pathway, but that's the current target that they're trying to set. And if we're going to intervene into, telling the federal government how to actually do their job and take this seriously, we need to be clear about what that means. Let's just look at what Canada's upstream, so within the boundaries of the Canadian border, which I know is an abstract and artificial thing, but let's just go there for a sec, what Canada's emissions look like. So since 1990, when the UN and everybody got together for the first time to really talk about climate change, and it was widely understood that this was a problem, Canada's emissions on total have risen by 20%. Our Kyoto target was 6% below 1990 by 2020. Alberta, the province of Alberta, is responsible for approximately 3/4 of that increase. With some increase in BC, Saskatchewan, and a teeny bit in Manitoba, but for the most part, it's been Alberta as the lion's share. 67% of that increase is coming from just the oil and gas sector, so we can sort of see where the pattern is coming from. And most subsectors of the oil and gas industry have actually seen declining emissions. They've actually gotten more efficient. And so natural gas, conventional oil, refining, and transmission have actually all seen emissions drop over that period. So when you actually boil down the numbers and get right in there, tar sands are the overwhelming majority of the increase in Canada's emissions since 1990. That one industry is almost single-handedly blocking Canada's progress. And politically, it's been the reason we haven't acted yet. Canada, every time we've had a discussion, we should act on climate change. Will it impact the pace and scale and development of the tar sands? It will? Okay, let's not do that. And that's been the threshold, the test in Canada for years about whether or not we're going to act on climate change. And we're still there, and that's what this conversation is largely about right now. Go on about that. But just to say the projections right now that for 2020, if we do nothing right now, with 11% of the population, Alberta's emissions will be the same as Ontario, Quebec, and BC combined.
Wow.
And the difference between the industry's ambition and no new growth in the tar sands is equivalent, and this is not within Canada, I'm just flipping here. This is global emissions, including all the carbon in that oil and all of the upstream emissions. Is equivalent to producing 46.6 billion barrels of oil, 36.6 gigatons of CO2. Those are, to put that into social math, that's 227 average US coal plants running for 40 years. That's what we're talking about in the difference in the increase going forward. So from a Canadian perspective, internally, domestic policy, for the way that the federal government likes to frame this conversation, just upstream emissions only, there's basically no feasible way that they can increase production from today's production levels at all if we have any chance of even meeting our weak target. And that target needs to be increased. Globally, and this I think is probably a really excellent points from the panel already, to put a bit of a wider spin on this, globally it is unbelievably unethical that Canada would increase its fossil fuel production at all for any reason whatsoever. Canada is in the UN, we're called an Annex 1 country. We're a developed country with huge historical responsibility for the emissions currently in the atmosphere. We have all of the resources to act. We have the historical responsibility for the problem. And we've agreed to, under international law, to actually take the first steps at the UN. So we actually have to stop peak emissions immediately and have them decline rapidly. And there's a whole other global equity discussion about right to develop. Canada was able to develop into a rich country by using the atmosphere as a dumping ground for carbon. And countries that are currently trying to develop their economies won't have that luxury. And there's a huge global equity problem that needs to be considered on this. So there is no ethical pathway. And if you get into the carbon budget piece, you'd see very quickly that Canada really needs to basically stop all exploration, development of fossil fuels, and then Canada is going to have a very difficult discussion about taking existing production offline in the future. And that's where the justice piece really comes in as well, is we need to have that discussion now so that we can actually have a plan in place to make sure that Canada can transition its economy in a way that actually is good for workers in Canada. I can go on and on with lots of pieces. The budget frame is something that I would really encourage many of you to think about conceptually for this. We have a global carbon budget. It's a very easy to calculate piece of math. It's a finite amount of carbon we can dump in the atmosphere. Canada has a piece of that. And if you want to add anything, if you want to increase production anywhere, you need to explain where that emission is going to come out of the budget somewhere else. It's a zero-sum game. And that's the concept that hasn't been widely adopted yet by the federal government. And it's a critical piece to this. So they're saying right now in Canada, yeah, well, we think we can grow our energy industry at the same time as dealing with climate change. And first of all, no, but let's put it to them. Show me the math on how that's going to work. In a zero-sum carbon budget, who else is going to have to make those reductions? That's stats I should probably go into. You can go for it. You can have them all, right? So maybe I should leave it there. We can talk a lot more about some of these issues in. Is that good on time? In the Q&A, but I could go on forever, so I'll let you.